Here I've cut out the other large ring, and this is going to fit right at the opening here of the main body tube. Alright, so I'm just going to test fit this. It's going to go right there. And then here once again we want a not too thick but even bead of glue right at the edge. Okay, thin that out a little bit there. Any excess glue will just smooth that around there. And I'm going to let this completely dry before we move on to the next step where we join the body tubes together. While I'm waiting for glue to dry on the motor mount and inside the body tube, I'm going to start preparing the fins. Now the fins are actually going to be frames of balsa that will then be skinned with cardboard that we'll cut out later. Right now I'm just going to do one set of fin parts here, as the other fins I'll do offline and off camera here. So first just go ahead and cut out all the pieces for a set. Alright, then I'm going to dry fit these. So come back to our instructions here. Alright, so this is piece N. Alright, piece O is the middle-sized angular one here. So this is going to go over the fin tab here, like that. Okay, and then P is the smaller of the triangular ones here. That's going to go on the outside, the tip edge. Like that. Okay, and then Q is the small trapezoid here. That's going to go in like this. And then the last piece here is R, and that's going to go in between. Now you'll probably notice here that these are not going to fit together immediately. Okay, and that's because we need to do some sanding in between these. So let's see if I get that one there. Almost get this one in. Alright, so before R goes in, we'll actually need to come in here. We're going to glue the two end pieces there. Alright, and then the Q piece that's going to go in here. And then we're going to have to do some sanding in there, okay, before everything goes together. Now they're showing, okay, so right here on 6, beveling the edges. You'll probably need to do that before you can get all these pieces to fit correctly. Okay, so when we get to that point, we'll go through the whole step there. Alright, for now I'm going to go ahead and cut out the rest of the pieces off camera, and then we'll see how we are in all of our gluing steps and what can be put together next. I have all of my fin pieces cut out, and here I've just got one of them. Now you'll notice here there's one set of fins where the fin tab has a hole in it, and this is the one that will go on the side of the engine clip here. And so it's got a little area that's been cut at an angle, and that's simply to allow for the flexion of the clip there. So this one will go in this particular slot after it's all put together and ready. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do one fin on camera here. And you might want a little emery board or a file handy just to trim pieces if they don't quite mate. Okay, now as I did earlier, I'm going to start by first just dry fitting these and make sure there aren't any problems. Okay, so that's the larger of our two triangular pieces on the root edge. The smaller one goes out here on the tip edge. Okay, now you notice here it tries to angle outward, so we need to flip it over and also just change it so that this is even. Okay, so we're going to start then by gluing those two pieces together, or those three pieces together. So here, just for ease and to keep my fingers from being quite so gooey, I'm going to use this applicator again. And once more, we don't need really heavy glue here. Doing that will just make longer drying times. Just try and put on a thin film of glue here on each side. Okay, and then we're just going to squish that together there. And then here I'm going to use a little tissue to remove the excess glue. At this point, it's just going to be more in the way. Because eventually what we're going to do is sand this so that we bevel this leading edge to match the piece here. And the same will be true over here. So on my trailing edge, okay, just a thin film of glue. And here I'm not even going to put one on the end piece. Okay, and again, we want to make sure that this front piece is glued flush and not sticking up there. Okay, coming back to the instructions. Okay, the small trapezoid Q goes on next. Okay, now this is supposed to go here. Alright, where the narrow end of the trapezoid meets up with our triangular piece. Alright, and it can go underneath there like that. Okay, so once again, just a little bit of glue there. Okay, and then this piece is going to go in like this. Now, according to the instructions, this is going to fit. I'm kind of dubious of that claim. I think it's going to try and knock this out. So, when all else fails, go back and make sure you're not screwing something up. Okay, they are pre-beveling the edges of piece R there. So I'm going to take a little bit of medium sandpaper. Okay, so this is going to go in here. I need to bevel this edge and this edge. Okay, so a little bit more glue. And once more, we'll just wipe off the excess glue at this point. Alright, so that's about how we should look. This is how it should look, framed in but not sanded yet. So I'm going to build the other 3 off camera, and then we'll come back. I have all 4 fins framed together here, and now we need to let this glue dry before we can do the shaping of them. So I'm just going to set those aside. And by now, our glue on the motor mount should be dry. And so now we're going to attach the inner body tube and the cowl. Now this is going to fit through the ring that we glued into place. Alright, and that's being really tight. So first of all, we're going to need to do a little bit of sanding on the inside here. Okay, so that fits all right. And then that's going to end up, should center right on the interior part of the forward centering ring in there, like that. Okay, and then the cowling piece is going to go over it. All right, and just like the other one, we're going to need to do a little bit of sanding there. Okay, so now we're going to take this all apart once more. And let's come back to our instructions. Alright, so we're going to put some glue down here on top of the forward centering ring, and also some glue right around the edge up there. Okay, so let's get another applicator here. And I'm going to put that right around, especially it's going all the way around the forward centering rings. I'm also using this as a fillet to fill in any gaps. But we also want it right on the outside edge of that reinforcement ring, because that's where the body tube is going to seat itself. So we're doing 2 jobs at once here. Okay. Now, instead of putting it directly on here, I'm going to put this body tube down part way until I'm almost in contact. And what I'm going to do instead is run a bead right around here, and then that'll force the glue into any gaps. Clean that up in a moment. Okay, so we're going to push that down and move things till we're on that inner part of the centering ring. clean up my mess here. Okay, and then we're going to put some more glue here. And we can put on a heavier amount. We don't want it dribbling down, but this will fill in any gaps between the two rings. Okay, and then we're going to put some glue up here. And this, the top part of the reducer will come in on here. Again, you want to be fairly generous, but not dripping. Okay. And unfortunately, this is all going to slide through. Actually, I'm not going to do that. That feels like it's going to grab. Alright, so I'm going to take this part off. It just feels like it's going to be too much and it's going to stick before I want it to. So what I'm going to do here is very quickly do a little more sanding so this is a little bit looser. Alright, we'll just kind of smooth all that in. Now the little gaps here, you can add glue to those now, or you can wait. I'm going to wait till my glue is completely dry, and then I'll use some contour putty to fill in the gaps here and make everything nice and smooth. Now that my fin assemblies are dry, I need to sand these again. And what they're trying to show here in the instructions is that we need to bevel these so that this end piece here kind of provides a template for the shape, as does this end piece. So here we've got the root edge, and we've got a little bit of the fin sticking up above the angle of this triangle here. Okay, a little bit here. We're going to take this area and round it off, or actually flatten it off so it's flush with this part. Okay, and then do a little bit of shaping here just so this is all nice in one surface, because then we're going to cover it with some cardboard skins. I'm going to start with 150 grit sandpaper and use the triangle as my sanding guide here. Now we don't want to be sanding a lot of the triangle itself. We want to sand the leading edge of the fin here. And we're going to go ahead and taper this all the way across so that we get a knife edge there that matches up with the two end pieces. So I'll turn this over to begin with. Okay, and now I'm just going to go along that edge and sand it back till it is even with these triangle pieces here. So that looks pretty good there. Alright, now we're going to come back here and take this piece here and make it even with this piece. Okay, so that's good. Over here on the tip edge, we're going to sand off this little bit here to match the trailing edge. Okay, I'm just going to do a little tiny bit of sanding right here and right here, just so we get good, even wood without bumps and such in it. It's got a little bit of a bump right there. Catch that. Okay, and this one's pretty much ready to be skinned. I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 fins off camera, and then we'll come back to put the skins on. Here I have all of my fins shaped and sanded, and so when you get done, this leading edge should be a knife edge there, and it should be even with the edges of the 2 triangular pieces here. So if these are sticking up a little bit, go ahead and sand them down and then put that knife edge on there. Alright, this edge here should be blended into the trailing edge, as should this in here. Okay, so that should all be nice and flat. That one's actually got a little bit to it. Just do a little more sanding there. Okay, now if you've got little dips or indents here, you can either ignore them, because you're not going to see them unless you're looking at the back side of the rocket, or you can use a little bit of either wood filler or plastic model putty, which is what I've got here, and you just smooth a little bit of this in. Okay, and then you let that dry for about 30 to 60 minutes, and then you can sand it. If you need more, you can add to it. Okay, now the tip edge here will be visible, so if you've got a little dip there, you might want to go ahead and fill that in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let that dry, and I'll do the same thing for the other fins and sand them off camera. While the putty on my fins is drying, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the skins here. So you should have 2 sheets of lightweight cardboard. Now you want to cut these out along the solid lines, not the dotted lines. The dotted lines are for a fold. And then using a straight edge here, we can put that right along the dotted line, and then use that to get a nice tight crease here. Alright, now the finish on this is the same whether it's back or front, so you can just go ahead and continue folding this over, like so. And then this is going to fit over the fin like this. Alright, and we'll glue that down, and then we can trim it off anything that's excess. But we'll need to wait for the putty to dry and for a final sanding there. So I'll finish folding these things off camera and then come back when we're ready to glue them on. I have all of my fins re-sanded so that we've smoothed out the contour putty here. And I've got all of my sheaths cut out as well. And so now what we're going to do is glue this on. And the instructions having us put the glue on the skin rather than on the wood. So we'll go ahead and do that here. Just for greater control, I'm going to use the applicator here. Basically, we're just going to run glue all the way around the edge. And this will overlap a little bit, so it's going to hang over the edges. And then we will trim it back once the glue is dried. And just like in most other things, we want a nice even bit of glue here, but we don't want it dripping. Just going to spread this out. And if you do have some excess, you can run it up the other side here. Okay, that looks pretty good there. And then we're going to take the fin frame now and stick that up against the line. And I'm trying to keep mine so that the root edge is fairly close there. That way I don't have to trim it as well. I'll have to do a little bit. Alright, but we're just going to press that in. Okay, and then we'll add glue to the other edge as well. Alright, then I'm going to fold this over and squash it down. Okay, now you want to be careful that you don't squash down too much in the middle and pull it away from the edges. And then once you've got that done, you can either take a heavy object like this battery pack here and put that on top, making sure that it is fully against there. You don't want an air gap there. Or you can use some small clamps like these ones to hold things into place. Okay, so either way is acceptable. It depends on what is more comfortable and what you have available there. Well, I only had one power pack that I could use for weighting these down, so I used clamps on the rest of it. And as you can see, it takes quite a few clamps. I'm going to let this dry now, and we'll come back when we're ready to trim off the excess on the edges. The glue on the fins has dried here. I'm not entirely satisfied with the way they came out. There's some waviness here. A little bit of glue still needs to dry on that one. This is the one that this is the one I weighed down with a battery pack. Yeah, so it doesn't show the clamp marks that some of these do. But it too didn't always necessarily adhere the way I wanted it to. So I'm going to let these continue to dry to make sure that glue is fully dried. And then we'll come back and trim a lot of this material off. And then if needed, we can fill in some of these cracks and gaps with a little bit of plastic model putty. Now that the glue is thoroughly dried on the fin assemblies here, we can go ahead and start trimming them. I'm going to start with this one here. So first of all, you want a fairly sharp blade in your knife. And the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of trim this down. Right, you don't want to get too much of an angle on this or you may cut down into the wood. So it's better to be sparing than overly zealous here. Alright, and of course cut in such a way that you're not going to cut yourself. Alright, now that's kind of resisting there because of the glue on it. Not because my blade is particularly dull. Alright, and then once you've got it down fairly close to the wood, then take some fine sandpaper. I'm going to use 220 here. and just sand down that cardboard until it's flush with the wood. Now when you're sanding across like this, it's going to tend to force the edges out, and so just come in here and sand those edges back. And you may have to repeat these several times here, so as you sand, just every so often get rid of that ridge on the edge. Now on this root edge here, it's kind of hard to get the sandpaper in, so you may have to do some closer cutting. Here though, if you accidentally nick the wood, it'll be covered up by when you glue it on it. I know I'm cutting toward myself here. I don't want to hear it. Okay, so ideally, once this is attached to the rocket, everything here should look like it's all one complete unit. Alright, now if you have some little gaps in here like this, you can either ignore them, because unless you're inspecting your rocket from below, nobody's going to see them. Or you can use some additional white or wood glue or some more of the contour putty on there to fill that in. I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 fins off camera, and then we'll come back and we should be about ready to put them on the rocket. I've finished sanding all of these, and on some of them they came out fine, that there wasn't any separation or anything. On some of them though, there was some delamination where the glue on the edges hadn't quite held. And so for those ones, I've just put a thin film of white glue along the edges here, and then I just spread over it to cover the entire thing there, so that we don't get ridges of glue, and this just keeps it more uniform. I'm going to let those continue to dry for a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and start mounting them onto the rocket. I'm ready to start mounting fins onto the rocket. And you may recall that one of these fins had a hole in the fin tab, and that's the fin that's going to go on the same side as the engine clip here. So first I'm just going to try and dry fit this. Alright, and it's a little off there, so I'm going to take my hobby knife and trim that out a little bit. And this is just one of the hazards of free cutting fin slots, is they don't come out perfectly. Alright, but we do want that as snug as we can make it. Okay, and ideally this should be fitting snugly down on there. Now I can actually look through the nozzle holes here and also make sure that I am right on top there of the engine clip. So let's see if we can get this. You can see right down in there. Okay, so what's happening is this angle is so that I can pull this up for the motor release, but we're still a little bit too tall there, and so now I'm just going to take some 100 grit sandpaper here. I'm just going to bring that down a bit. Okay, so just give it a couple of strokes. And I'm going to go ahead and increase the angle on that a little bit too, so that it still clears. Right, now if I come back and try this again, right, that's fitting much tighter there, which is what I want. Okay. Now normally those fin tabs are going to get glued onto the motor mount tube, which makes them stronger. With this one, frankly, I'm not sure why they didn't design this a little differently and have this offset. But the way it is, that fin tab is right on top of the motor clip there, and that's not going to be as strong. So I'm going to have to make sure that I get a good adhesion out here on the body tube.
I've got it. Yeah.
So here I'm also going to take my sandpaper. It doesn't really matter what grit it is, but just roughen up a little bit the cardboard where that's going to stick. And that just takes off some of that glossy finish there, and it's going to give us a better hold with the glue. Okay, so now I'm going to take my wood glue here, and I'm going to put some right there. Now we don't want to get sloppy with this, because just like with any other rocket, when you're putting the fins on, it takes a lot longer to dry if you have a lot of glue on there. Okay, so I'm just going to put a thin amount on and kind of wipe that around here. Now I am using a little bit more than I normally would. As I said, we're going to have a little bit of a gap there simply because of the width of this. Okay, and then like I do with most of mine, I'm going to put this on, all right, have it make contact there, and I'm going to pull it back off again, and I'm going to allow that to dry for about 30 to 60 seconds and let it get tacky. Alright, our time has passed here, and I'm just going to put this right back in where it was. Okay, and I'm just going to hold this there for about 30 seconds, and then I can let go. I'm also going to be checking this for straightness here. So we want this nice and perpendicular to the tube. Okay, but we also want it to be parallel to the tube. So if we've got a cant to it, that means our slot is probably crooked. Okay, and now we're going to let this dry for 5 to 10 minutes at least, and then do the same thing for the remaining fins off camera. The glue on my fins is dry, or at least dry enough to handle. And you can see we've got some gaps in here caused by irregularities in the cardboard and such, and we'll fill those in with fillets here in a little bit. And the next thing we need to do is attach the launch lug, and we're going to cut this in half. Okay, so we'll just take our ruler here, alright, that's at about 32, so 16 millimeters will be right about there. Okay, now on here, we made our launch lug line earlier. And the first launch lug is going to go at 6 millimeters, or about a 1/4 inch from the aft end here. So right about here. I'm just going to roughen that up a little bit. And then the other one goes at 4 inches, or 10.2 centimeters here. Okay, so that's going to be right about there. And again, I'm just going to roughen up a little bit of the area ahead of that. Okay, and then we'll just add a little bit of wood glue to each of these. We really don't need to wait for it to become tacky, as there's not a lot of tension on these going on. Okay, that's way more glue than I needed. Alright, and now I'm just going to stick that on. And make sure we've got it aligned. A little glue there, it'll become part of the fillet later on. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that one is straight. So I'm sighting down the body and the line and the launch lug all at the same time. And those should all be parallel in line. Alright, now I'm going to do the same thing with the forward launch lug here. Okay, now I'm going to sight through both launch lugs, and they should be in line with each other and in line with the line and in line with the body tube. And they are there. So I'm going to let this dry for a little while, and when we come back we'll do fillets for everything. While I'm waiting for the fins and launch lugs to dry, I'm going to start assembling the detail nozzle assemblies here. Okay, I'm just going to cut out one set to begin with. Okay, so there are two halves to these smaller nozzles. Alright, and then we've got the larger nozzles here. And then this is a base piece for the smaller nozzles. Alright, I'll cut out the other ones later. I'm just doing these ones for demonstration. Alright, so first thing, go ahead and trim off anything that's weird. I actually bent the tip of that blade. I'm going to need new blade in hand. So now, as I was doing it, just trim off any flash that remains there. Stuff that doesn't belong. Be careful you don't cut off these little pegs on the inside. Okay, we look on this one. A little bit of remnants there from the sheet. Okay, a little bit up here on this one again. Alright, so these two are going to fit together. Like that. Alright, I'm going to make sure we don't have any flash again here, so we can see a little bit yet there. Hopefully I'm in focus here. So you just trim that off. You can also use some 400 grit sandpaper if you need to. Something really fine. Now in the instructions, again, they're using kind of a generic tube type cement. I'm going to use a brush-on cement again here. I'm going to use my instructions as a work spot. So here, we just want a really thin coating. And if you need to, you can actually use tweezers here to hold these. I'm kind of right on the border between doing that and just using my fingers. And again, with the brush-on type cement, you have to work fairly quickly as they do evaporate with great speed. All right, and we're just going to hold that together for about 30 seconds and then we'll come back. Alright, my glue has set there. Next we're going to take this base piece. Now in here, alright, one of these base pieces, the one I actually got strictly by accident, has a notch carved into it right here. Alright, come on, focus. Focus. There we go. Maybe. Alright, so that's for the engine clip. The other ones of these are all solid at that point. Okay. Regardless, these all go together the same way. So this nozzle has a cant to it, and that should go over this piece here. Alright, so it should be facing away from this end. And again, we'll go ahead and use some of the brush-on type cement here. And install it thusly. it's got a little bit of an edge there that it should pop down into. There we go. All right, and then just twist it as you need to make sure that it is facing outward the correct way. There we go. Okay. Still a little bit off. All right, so your seam should line up with this. All right, and then again, either before or after doing that, remove any little bits of flash. And that piece is assembled. The larger nozzles here are pre-assembled. All you need to do is clean off the flash. Careful not to clean off your finger, like I almost did there. And again, you can use some very fine sandpaper on this as well, or in addition to. Now, the instructions suggest painting the rest of the model and then hand painting the little assemblies here and putting them on later. But this is going to fit in right here. Okay, and there's a little tab underneath there that fits into these little slots there. And then the larger ones fit in here, and there's a little tiny notch at the outer edge of this, and there's a little tiny bit right there, a little peg in it that's supposed to line up with that. And that's because these are also canted away. Okay, so when we're all done with this, this is how these will go in. Now here we're gluing plastic onto cardboard. And to do that, my first choice is a gel type super glue. My second choice is a tube type plastic cement. The brush on type of cement here does not make a good grip between dissimilar substances. So off camera, I'll go ahead and assemble the rest of these, and then I'll take them away to paint. When I come back, we'll start doing the fillets. Now, as far as I can see, the instructions actually don't call for the addition of fillets, but unless you got those skins on just perfectly, you're going to want them. I'm going to check this one more time, but nope, it doesn't actually call for fillets. So they are optional then. I'm going to put them on anyway because I'm not going to get clean lines the way I want without the fillets on there. I'm going to go ahead and do the launch lugs first. Alright, I'll just do them all at the same time here. You're going to want to have a rag or some tissues handy, which I do. Alright, and then we're just going to smooth these in like that. A few people have asked me what these are. They're tech wipes. They're basically scientific Kleenexes. Okay. Then once those are on, we can go ahead and do the fins. And I prefer to do 2 facing fins at a time. As long as you keep the rocket horizontal, you can just do all the fins at once. Now these may require some thicker fillets just because some of these gaps are bigger. But I recommend doing them in stages rather than trying to do one great big deep fillet, because it's almost certainly going to run and or have bubbles in it. Fighting with the Kleenexes here. Alright, then we'll just move on to the next set. Now just let this dry horizontally, and it's going to take several hours for those fillets to dry. But once that's done, I'll come back and inspect them and see if they need another coat. My fillets are dry, and the ones on the fins look pretty good. There are a couple of little tiny bubbles there. Let me see if I can get this in focus. Okay, but they're not showing a lot of gaps, and they seem to be thick enough that they've filled in the cracks there. Alright, that one may need a little more work. Over on my launch lugs, as often happens, I do have some little air gaps in there. And so at this point, structurally this is fine, but if you want to have a better finish, you could do another coat of glue on these to help fill in those bubbles. Or you can use this stuff. This is plastic model contour putty. This one's made by Testers. There are several brands out there. It just depends on what your hobby store carries. This is a water cleanup, non-toxic after it dries, and it's not toxic to skin. And so what I'm going to do here is this is really good for building up fillets as long as you've already got the strength. This does not have a lot of strength to it. So it's good for building them up, but not for the initial fillet. But otherwise, you treat this kind of the same. So you just run a bead along where you want it, smooth it in with a finger. Now it does dry really quickly, at least to the touch here. And so you don't want to start a whole bunch and then go back and smooth them all in. Just do one object at a time. And generally this dries within about 30 to 60 minutes, depending on how thick it is. And then it's really readily sandable. Although it does tend to clog up the sandpaper, so just keep that in mind. Alright, so there's two of my launch lugs there. Yeah, see what happens is if it starts to dry and then it kind of gets all crumbly there. But I can fix that later. I'm going to do the same thing on the fins all the way around, but I'll do that off camera. Here's what it looks like after I've put the contour putty on everything now. It still needs to dry, but in addition to the fins and the launch lug, I've also used this to fill in the gaps and cracks in this transition. Now I'll still have to sand all this down, but I need to wait at least an hour on this because some of these are fairly thick. And then we'll use some 220 all the way up to 400 grit sandpaper in some cases to smooth all this in so that we get a nice transition between the body tube and the fins, the body tube and the launch lug, and up here the body tube and the fairing. Here the putty fillets are dry, although I haven't sanded them yet. And so what I'm going to do next is go ahead and sand these fillets, and then I'm going to take this to the painting booth and give it a layer or two of primer, and that will help show up any of the imperfections that may still be left in the putty or something like that, and I can fix those again at that time. So I'll come back when those processes are done.